All right, so in this video, we're gonna be investigating the Ozone production facility here in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. We're gonna see how Ozone takes flat pieces of nylon material and transforms them into a flying airfoil like the glider behind me. Speaking of which, this is my brand new Freeride 2 16 meter. We're gonna see how Ozone does custom logos like you see behind me.
In addition to all of this, I am very excited to announce that I am officially a direct Ozone importer. Over the years, I've helped hundreds of customers pick out their perfect Ozone wing, and this new relationship is just going to allow me to serve those customers even better. Whether you're in the market for your first glider or your forever glider, be sure to email me at info@tuckergott.com or visit the first link in the description to get your Ozone order placed.
I'm super stoked. This whole factory is amazing. Let's get straight into it. So to get the video started, we're gonna look at the entire lifespan of a glider from the moment the order's placed to when it gets packaged and it's ready to ship. So the process really starts right here at this computer. When an order's placed, the order comes through, a serial number is given to the actual glider, which is its identity. Then from there, it goes through almost 1,000 employees, and there's 9 different buildings at this facility. Once the serial number is assembled, I guess really the first start of the entire process is the raw materials. So let's go take a look at that. So in this room here, this is where the raw materials come in for the very first time. But before they're actually put on a shelf, they have to go through some quality control checks, which happen right here. So here, one of the checks is porosity. They're taking samples of the fabric and making sure it passes all of the porosity checks. So right next to the porosity check, they actually have all these pulleys, which are used for the risers, and everyone is inspected to make sure it doesn't have any sharp edges that could actually harm the material it's actually fastened to. Right on here is a visual inspection, so it just unrolls and re-rolls the entire loop of fabric, and they're just checking for any imperfections in the fabric, any visual defects. And right here, they are doing a UV check. So they test all these samples through different lengths of time, which equate to hundreds of hours of sun exposure, and they're basically looking for the material to age in a controlled manner that you would expect. And anytime you see a pink shirt, that's a quality control person.
Simultaneously, in another part of the facility, they're performing a lot of the tests that we learned about back in France. Samples are pulled from every batch of new fabric and line material, and they're tested to make sure that they meet every single standard.
So one important thing to note about all this testing, those serial numbers that's identified to every single glider, they can track it back to the batch of fabric that they use from raw material and track it to the actual testing that they did to confirm that every single batch of raw material used on every specific wing was tested and approved. So from here, all the quality control checks are done. As long as the material passes, it goes into the next room. All right, so in here we have all of the raw materials that have passed inspection. Lots and lots of fabric, lots and lots of lines. And then around in the next room, we have even more. So here you can actually see the in and outs, and they use a system to make sure that all the raw material is actually being cycled. So there's no material just sitting on the shelf for a long time. They're always pulling from the older stock, and then that gets replaced with newer stock. So in here we have even more raw materials. This is a heavy bag of all trim buckles. Got carabiners in here. We've got webbing for harnesses. This is actually really cool. So in the leading edge of gliders, there's this plastic rod material that helps keep the shape of the nose. And he said that these rolls come in too tight, so they actually unspin them so that they can actually use them. All right, so we've seen where the glider's born at this computer. The serial number is given to the glider. We've seen where the raw materials come in, how they're quality control checked. The next step is for the actual fabric to be cut. So we're gonna go up to the laser cutting rooms. All right, so now we're taking the scooters from one building to another. Like I said, there's 9 different buildings here that they do the production of paragliders, paramotors, kite surfing wings, speed flying wings. We're headed to the laser cutting building right now. Obviously the scale of this place is insane. Every single bay that you see behind me is a laser cutting machine, and this is only one of 2 buildings that are constantly laser cutting. Here we can see what they're actually cutting, and super interesting, when we were at the research and development facility in France, we saw how they do all the CAD modeling. So from the 3-dimensional CAD modeling, the guys there in France turn that into a 2-dimensional sheet, They send the file over here, and then these guys arrange those two-dimensional pieces to make the most efficient cut. So then that's plugged into this machine. Here we have a Spider 3 28 meter that's being actively cut in the background. Let's go take a look. So this whole table is basically like a reverse air hockey table. You see all these holes? It's actually sucking air in to glue this piece of fabric to the table. Super interesting thing they were telling me about this is you would think that if you wanted to mass produce wings, you could stack 10 sheets of fabric and just cut through all of them and make 3 gliders at once. But they only do 1 glider at a time because doing multiple would sacrifice the quality control. On this table, Spider 3 is being cut. Approximately 3,000 pieces are cut for each wing, which is insane. This is gonna take about 8 different tables worth to make 1 glider. All right, I'm kind of scared, but I'm gonna pull this rib off. Oh, that's really stuck. So they pull every rib like this off of the machine. We're gonna go over to the next room where they're actually pulling all the pieces. I don't know how they do it, but out of 3,000 pieces, they stack them in a certain order to keep everything organized, which is insane. Let's go look at the next room. So here you can see they're pulling all the cut pieces off. They stack them and clamp them together, somehow keeping everything organized. So every single piece is also coated somewhere on the tail. You can see this one very, very small. There's a tiny little 7 cut in there. And another interesting thing is you'll see all these tiny little pinholes along the way. Those are alignment markers for what we'll see when they're sewing the pieces together. They use those pinholes to keep accuracy when they're actually sewing these pieces together. Now that we've seen all of the laser cutting work that goes on here, we're gonna go to the next room, which is where I think it gets the most exciting, where they're actually starting to sew these 3,000 fabric panels together. Let's go to that room. So behind me is, I think, the most interesting building in this entire facility. This is where all the stitching gets done, and it's a progression from the laser cut pieces we just saw all the way up to the final product behind me. Here at our first station, you can see we have the ribs like we just got out of the laser cutting room, all clamped together in special order so that they don't get them mixed up. And each person here is adding reinforcement tabs to every single rib. So on this rib here, if you look really close, you can see these tiny little pinholes we were talking about from the laser cutting machine that they're going to be using as alignment markers in the next phase where they're actually starting to sew these pieces together. So at this station, like we saw in the stock room where they're keeping all the raw materials, those nylon rods that go into the nose, right here at this station, she's actually stitching those onto the nose. We've got a big spool of that material, and she's carefully stitching them along the nose inlet of the glider. So moving on from the ribs, the next part of construction is going to be the wingtips. And this is actually really interesting. They start on the wingtips because the wingtips are some of the most difficult parts to actually fabricate. They were saying for someone to get to the point that they have the skills to assemble a wingtip takes at least a year. And that's because these cells are actually closed, so they have to turn the wingtip inside out and stitch, building it panel by panel while flipping the whole wingtip inside out. It's crazy. So like I mentioned in the beginning, anyone in a pink shirt is a quality control person. So there's multiple quality control checks throughout this line, because if there is some type of error, you don't want it to compound. So right here, the wingtip has been finished, and she's going through and inspecting every stitch and seam on the wingtip. All right, so the next phase of construction is creating the entire bottom surface of the glider. Here we have all the internal members, the ribs, which have been reinforced with mylar pieces, nylon rods, all clamped together, all kept in order. And they're taking these internal structures and then sewing on panels right here to create the entire bottom surface of the glider. So once again, moving down the assembly line, once the bottom surface gets stitched together, we have another pink shirt for quality control, and she's here checking to make sure all of the internal ribs are stitched properly to the bottom surface of the glider. So you just heard that bell ring. That is for a 5-minute break, and they get 5 minutes off to do whatever they want. Everyone's kind of just checking their phones. You notice before the bell rang, everyone is locked in, just working tediously, not really talking to anyone else. They're just focused on their job, but now they have 5 minutes to go do whatever they want. So we'll pick up after this break. here, she's actually sewing the top surface onto that bottom surface that already has all the ribs in place. And she's using all those little pinhole alignment marks to make sure everything is fit super precisely. All right, so here we have 2 more pink shirts, and this is actually starting to look like a glider. We've got the top surface, the bottom surface, and a whole wingtip. This is gonna be a Roadster 4, and they're going through panel by panel, inspecting everything, making sure that this is assembled properly. And if you take a look right over here, this orange glider, you're gonna be seeing a lot more on my channel. In the last video, you guys saw how we talked about the customization that Ozone offers, putting logos on the bottom skins of gliders. We sat with Russell when he actually made that, and here this glider is that they're starting to put together. So this is crazy. I'm seeing the inside of my future glider.
Now we're gonna roll the clock back just a little bit to see how those super custom bottom panels were made for my free ride.
Ozone offers 2 types of custom logos. One is gonna be stuck on, and the other is gonna be sewn in. So on the stuck on, they're basically just sticking some fabric onto the existing glider. So it's not quite as durable, and it adds a little bit of weight. The sewn in is the way to go, and that's what I'm doing. Basically, they do some magic here where they have these paper templates printed out, and then each piece of underskin on the glider gets stacked on top of that, and they're using all these alignment marks to stick down the fabric initially. So each part of the logo is stuck down, but then they go ahead and sew it on, and then they trim out the underside of the orange fabric. We're gonna take a look at that in just a second. So now we see they have the black sewn on, and she's very carefully trimming that orange fabric from the bottom skin out to reduce the weight, but it's structurally just as strong because it's all sewn together. From here, every panel is going to get sewn together to the underside of the wing, and magically all of these black shapes are going to align for the Big Risky logo. Now my logo is super simple, it's one color, it doesn't have a lot of different intricacies to it, but Ozone can do all kinds of crazy stuff with the logos that gets way more complex than this. All right, so behind me is final assembly where the gliders are fully coming together. But before we take a look at this, simultaneously while all this is happening, in another building, they're cutting and measuring the lines and cutting and creating the risers. So we're gonna take a look at that. Then we're gonna come back here and see how the lines, risers, and actual glider come together to the final product. All right, we're back on the scooters. We're headed over to a new building where they're doing the risers and the lines. All right, so here we have the very beginning of the life of a riser. We've got the raw material set up on a spool in the back. This machine here, you can actually feel the heat coming off of it because it chops the material with a hot knife. And it also simultaneously marks with that Sharpie that he just put in. So they load up the file to cut the raw material here. That spits out a singular piece of webbing that's going to become the riser. And in all these little red bins, you see the different riser parts, the pulleys, the buckles, the trim pieces that the next guys are going to start assembling. All right, so here you can see the next phase. It looks like this guy is putting on trim tape as well as the magnets to the risers. The risers are actually one full continuous piece of fabric, which is super cool. So each guy has their own role in that whole chain of events that's creating the riser. So here we see a bunch of sewing machines creating the very nice Ozone neoprene toggles, turning that raw material into loops, sewing on the little swivel mechanisms that end up being connected to your brake line. So it looks like this is a Roadster 4 riser getting some bar tacks done with the different malleons put in place. We have the trim tab already created on the bottom, and he's looping the webbing around to create the A's, B's, C's, and D's. So here we see another pink shirt. Once the riser is fully fabricated, we have another quality control guy. He's taking measurements on the risers to make sure that they're absolutely perfect. All right, now we're on to the line production. This is the very first step where they're taking the raw materials, which we saw in the very beginning, and it goes on this machine, which has all the data programmed into it. The machine pulls the line to the exact length. It adds markers with a Sharpie, and then it uses a blade to cut the line, which is then sent on to the next stage of production. So she grabs each of those raw pieces of line that were just cut and marked, and there's a sticker sheet that has the assigned length value on there, and all of that is linked together, one sticker per line group. So all these tables here, they're taking those raw materials that were just cut, stuck together with the stickers, and they're adding splicing for little bits of reinforcement and starting to loop the lines using those Sharpie marks that were just added with the last machine. Here we can see another very skilled job. They're taking those line sets that have been looped and spliced back on each other and stitching them together. Each one precisely done, cut, and then trimmed. So then those groups, once they are sewn, the loop is sewn together, they get sent right back here where they actually have like a hot knife that they're trimming off the end and burning it so that it's nice and clean and isn't gonna fray or anything. So here we see another final step of the process, a pink shirt for quality control. And they're going to be adding tension to a specific amount of weight and checking the length of each line that has now been sewn on each end. Each of these stickers that was assembled or added in the very beginning has the spec for the length, so they can very simply pull tension on it and see that it matches the spec that it needs. So once everything has been verified, quality control has checked the length of every line, they're put in these sets and groups. And what this guy is doing is laying them all out on the table with the serial number right here and all of the stickers shown to the spec of the line. Once he has everything laid out, he's going to take a picture with the digital camera so that they have everything on file with the serial number and every single individual line length. Just in case there is ever any issue, they can go back and make sure that they did everything perfectly. From here, he's going to group those together, put them all in the entire line set, and that gets sent to our final production where the risers, lines, and glider come together. All right, so we just saw how the risers and lines were created. Now, right behind me, we have a few gliders that are queued up for final assembly. The fabric has been fully inspected by the pink shirts back and to my left. Now we have the gliders, and in each of these buckets, we have a serial number keeping track the entire way through. We have the glider bag, we have a line set, and a set of risers. Now from here, they're going to be attaching the line sets to the actual fabric. Let's take a look. So right here at this stage, these guys are taking the line sets that were just created and attaching them to the gliders. They have their line charts over here to make sure everything stays where it's supposed to be. And then next, they're checking the lengths of all the lines. So this is actually a really interesting process. He's got this whole setup and he's using a laser and pulling on each line with a calibrated amount of weight, shining that laser onto the backboard there. The laser is Bluetooth connected to the computer, which goes to this spreadsheet up top, and it's fulfilling each measurement on the fly, showing exactly how long each line is. And each line has a tolerance of 10 millimeters, so you can see the tolerances are automatically being calculated, and he can check that every single line is within spec. All right, so he's gonna do a quick demo here where he actually measures incorrectly to show what happens if a line is out of spec. See, now that one, he purposefully miscalculated and it rings the alarm and shows that the value is not correct. Now he's gonna go back and make sure it's actually correct. This process is super important because, like we learned about in the research and development video, these gliders are made to a specific trim, and he's making sure, quality control-wise, every glider leaves the factory in a perfect trim position so that it's ready to fly. And that trim data, this whole spreadsheet, is actually also attached to the serial number so that they can go back and confirm that all of this was done properly. So we're almost at the complete final stage of assembly. They have this giant station here where each glider gets inflated, so they do a final visual inspection, make sure everything is perfect, and it's at this point where they take those lines that were just connected, measured. Here is where they're attaching the risers to the glider. So here you see he's got the malleons open on the actual riser, and he's checking the continuity of each line, attaching those lines to the risers, and they have this whole setup so you can see perfectly visually that everything is aligned correctly. So now that they have the risers attached, the final stage is folding the glider, which is something everyone always wants to know, because you get a brand new glider, you pull it out of the package, and it's the most perfect fold that you'll never be able to reproduce. They have one laying on the ground right here that they just folded up, but in a second they're gonna take this Mojo Power 2 off the wall and they're gonna fold it. They're gonna see exactly how they do it so perfectly, and this is one of the biggest things I've wanted to see here at the factory. All right, I guess step one, they've got the glider off the wall, and they're just gonna do a rough fold. One glider out and one comes in, and this is where the magic happens. As someone who's packed a lot of parachutes, I still don't know how they actually do these so precise. 3 people at a time. One guy is perfectly aligning the nose, and the rest are creating perfect folds on every cell of the glider. Now the nose is going to stay aligned, but the tail ends up getting shorter, so she's starting to stack these folds shorter and shorter by each fold. They make it look so easy, but I swear, I've done this many times and it's not that easy. Glider strap goes on and then into the bag. All right, so that's exactly how it's done. That's how your glider gets folded at the factory. No crazy tricks. They're just really, really good at it. So good, they didn't even have to communicate with each other. They just folded it, and that was very satisfying to watch. So from here, we've got the final glider, all of the serial numbers, all the products that come with it. We'll see how this gets finally packaged up so that it's ready to send to the customer. So after the glider is completely finished, it gets folded, it gets put in these red bins, and it moves down here back to our original computer where the order first came in. In the background, you can see the guys again in the pink shirts. They're doing the last final quality control, boxing up everything with all the accessories that would come with the wing, like the speed bar and such. They go into these red bins here. So a red bin like this will include a glider fully packaged up with the serial number added on. Right here we have a Triox 2 41 meter. The red bins mean that the glider is complete, but then when they're ready to ship and be fulfilled, they go into these yellow bins, which means the whole order is ready to be fulfilled and sent out to the customer, which they're doing back here. So here we see the final stage where they're taking the boxes off the shelves. The orders are being fulfilled, packaged, and then they get sent out with the shipping provider direct to the importer and then to the customer. So we fully covered the entire production of a glider start to finish. Now we're in the building where Ozone makes harnesses. Obviously they make a lot of harnesses for paragliding, speed flying, ground handling, but also paramotoring. This is the new-ish to the market Indy. I have yet to actually try one on my motor, but I'm gonna be trying one very soon. We're gonna take a look at their production line for the harnesses now. So at the very beginning of the production assembly line, we start with the raw materials. Behind me, you can see all different rolls of colors that they're cutting on the laser cutter here for fabrics. We've got the laser cutter operator there. And just like the risers, we have the same sort of machine where they're taking the raw webbing material and cutting them with these hot knives. Then we move down the whole assembly line this way. The assembly line is kind of split into 2 different groups. On one side, we have the less complicated harnesses like the Indy and Oxygen. And then on the far side, we have the super complicated ones like the Submarine, which we saw in France, which was that big inflatable paragliding harness. Got everyone doing stitching with webbing and then bringing all those raw materials that they laser cut all together into a harness. This machine is actually really cool. This is an F-race harness. This is like the lightest harness you can possibly have. It's stitching on this automatic stitching machine onto a flat piece of fabric. And the fabric isn't the structural member, the stitching actually is. So this is super duper lightweight harness technology. Here we see that F-race harness coming together with more stitching and padding being assembled. Here we see they're actually making the bridles for the reserves, which we're gonna be looking at in a second, how they produce the entire reserve parachutes. So here we can see some stitching of the webbing for a harness, and these sewing machines actually have automated programs within them for the stitching pattern to kind of eliminate some human element. So we see her loading up some of this webbing, and then there's an X pattern that the sewing machine automatically stitches to get those 2 pieces of webbing together. And then all the way at this end of the assembly line, we have the final pink shirts doing all the inspections on the harnesses. So this is our final stop of the Ozone factory tour. In this building, they're doing the Angel Square Reserves, which is the reserve I run in my paramotor. And I have to say, if you're not running a reserve, you really should. Everyone should have one, even though we wish to never use them. But all these orange canopies you see out in the back are the Angel Squares. They're sewing them, they're going through quality control, and then at the very end of the assembly line is where these guys are packing them up with that beautiful, crispy factory fold.
Check it out. We are back in Arizona, obviously, and I am under my brand new super custom Freeride 216 meter that I literally watched be born in the factory, and I helped factory fold. Insane. I feel like I have a special emotional attachment to this glider now. I was part of its creation. Before we end this video, I want to give you guys a huge thank you for all the support and feedback on the Ozone video from France. A lot of really good feedback, and the propeller winner is going to be Mark Frazier, and I hope I'm saying that right, but I'll put your username up on the screen. Email me, info@tuckergott.com, so that I can get your shipping address and ship that propeller to you. Huge thank you to Ozone for all the support on both of these videos. I learned so much, and as I said in the beginning of this video, I am now a direct Ozone importer, so I'm working directly with the factory, which means I can support the customer's needs even better than before. So if you like Ozone products, you like what you've seen in my videos, and you want to purchase one, hit me up. I would really appreciate that support. I'm gonna turn back towards the LZ. I'm gonna go enjoy this brand new Freeride 2, have a little fun tonight, and I will see you guys in the next episode, which is going to be a road trip with two of my good friends, Colby and Matt, and I'm going to be teaching Matt how to base jump. So little pause in video content again, but we'll be back with brand new stuff very soon. Hope you guys enjoyed. Till the next one, have fun, fly safe. Peace.
Yo.